and thank you for joining Politics for Parents. Today is September 10th, debate day, and I'm really excited to release this discussion with Mother Forward, a group of moms who are activists that are advocating for policies that help, working moms and families. This episode specifically focuses on childcare, the need for affordable childcare. But yesterday, Mother Forward delivered a petition with over 650 signatures to ABC, because they are hosting tonight's debate, asking that they, prioritize a discussion about paid family leave and protections for pregnant workers, because a lot of pregnant women have been having trouble in the workforce or getting fired unfairly. And this is a great organization for parents, working parents, everyone, facing the struggles we all do of working and raising children in today's economy and in our country that really lacks an infrastructure to support us the way we need to and our families. So I hope you enjoy this discussion, and please find a way to take action and get involved if you don't think, our politicians are doing enough to represent us. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Wilson. I'm a historian, an activist, and the host of the Freedom Over Fascism podcast, where we talk to people who give us insight into the current political moment, inspiration for state and local organizing, and connections with our co-conspirators all across the country. You'll meet rural organizers who focus on electing young and diverse candidates, independent journalists who prioritize democracy over disinformation, and candidates building change at the state and local level. I invite you to join the Freedom Over Fascism community and listen to Freedom Over Fascism wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much, folks, for joining Politics for Parents. I'm Nicole Tage, and I'm really excited because I'm here with two awesome moms who are full-time workers and also accomplished activists. So we've got Sarah Ribeiro. Did I get that right? Ribeiro?
Yes,
And, Ribeiro and Christina Miller here from Mother Forward. And this is a really great group because they are squarely focused on the issue of affordable childcare and getting legislators to pass regulations and finding ways to achieve affordable childcare in this country. And this is just from what I'm seeing, I think you guys are probably one of the most effective groups at doing this right now, because I'm really loving some of the moves you're making, your presence on Capitol Hill, the toolkits, the calls to actions you put out. I think you're probably one of the more effective groups I see in this space. That's just my view, but I just wanted to put that out there for anyone listening. You guys are really doing the work. And you guys are both full-time working moms yourselves. We're actually recording this on a Saturday afternoon in August at 3 p.m. Eastern, because between our time zones and everything, this was like what worked after, I think, 2 months of us trying to get this together. So number one, thank you for taking the time to be here. And number two, I think this really just shows your commitment. And I think it's really heartening to see that this is a moment, I think, in our country's history where people look back and say, wow, like women really rallied and made things happen. So typically I'll do like a bio intro of my guests, but for the both of you, I just want to turn it over to each of you to hear about your journey into activism, how you got linked up with Mother Forward, and just like a little bit like, who are you? What are you about? So maybe Sarah, if you want to start, and then Christina, we can hear from you about, kind of your journey here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a mom based in Brooklyn, New York. I have a 1-year-old. She's 14 months, depending on how you define it. And I have a history of community planning. I've lived in cities for most of my life. And for me, just being community forward has always been important. And that was something that I didn't really get an experience of before I was a mom. Mom communities are kind of insular. So when I had my daughter last May in 2023, I did not really know how to explore childcare. Luckily, I'm the youngest of three, so my older sisters were able to provide me a little bit of support. But finding childcare in New York was treacherous, to say the least. So my daughter was probably about 6 months old when I first got an Instagram ad actually from Mother Forward about some of the initiatives that they were doing. And I just went ahead and I signed up for their newsletter. And I got a call from Katie at Mother Forward almost immediately. And she asked me, tell me everything. What is your childcare experience like? At that point, I was still searching. Working from home full time with a 6-month old was a challenge, and I made it work for as long as I did. My daughter wasn't enrolled in childcare until she was about 9 months old. And basically, since then, I've been involved with Mother Forward. There are a bunch of different working groups in there, and I've kind of passed along most of them. And right now, I really focus a lot on monitoring policy, monitoring news, and making sure that everybody in Mother Forward is informed of what the latest research is, what the latest policy moves are, and where we should be really focusing our attention.
Great. Um, so appreciate you, and the work you're doing and also the research you're doing because 'cause I'm sure I benefit from that. Because 'cause I've found that Mother Forward is the best resource I have actually on this issue, and I've been searching
Oh,
for
that's
years, and there's
amazing.
lots of different research centers I follow, but you guys are really crushing it in that department. So, Christina, I'd love to hear from you as well and your story.
Thank you so much. My name's Christina. I'm from originally from Northern California, but lived in Southern California for the past 15 years. And my husband and I had two boys during the pandemic. They're both under 5. And I guess during the pandemic, it's just there were so many challenges, right? That everyone faced, but specifically those who had children. I worked with my neighbors and family, and that's who ended up helping me. But then once, both of us, my husband and I were working more, and we had the two boys, it was just becoming more difficult. And so, I've been in research since I think 2010. I've been involved in research, and so I'm just naturally I like to read a lot and do research about this type of topic even before I had kids. And so I already kind of knew it was going to be difficult, but I think that with the pandemic, things just I think got worse, with regards to childcare and childcare centers closing, et cetera. So I just happened to come across this article in the Huffington Post. That really inspired me to get involved. At the end of the article, which had discussed a mom who's married, both of them are working, and literally one of them had to end up quitting their job because they just didn't make enough money to pay for childcare for their two boys. And so it hit me because I'm like, that's my life. Like that's what I'm going through. And I know I'm not the only one. And so at the end of the article, it said, if you want to get involved, reach out. And then I got connected with Katie. And so Mother Forward has just been, it's been more than just getting involved in politics or learning more, about this political issue, right? It's like a support group as well. And so, like we've had calls where we have, monthly calls, and then we've had other types of calls, and just talking with other moms, being able to understand what they're going through throughout the country, not just in California but across the country, and being able to connect to people who are going through the same thing, having kids during the pandemic, and then knowing that we do have a voice that's being heard is amazing. Like what we're all talking about here, what we've all mentioned, it's just it kind of gives me the goosebumps to just think about that we have an ability to impact this, for the future, for now, but also for the future parents and children, of our country. And I'm just so thankful for Mother Forward and our group, and being able to vent, and also put into action what it is that we want done, and so that these improvements can be made and be long lasting.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, first I wanna say, I get, I think, like, the urgency now, especially with both of you having younger children. My children, my oldest is 7, my youngest is turning 3 in September, so I had 1 child well before COVID, and then I had a COVID baby, and let me tell you that the childcare experience post-COVID was absolutely, like, earth-shattering for me, as a working mom. Um, it was completely different. The wait lists were so much longer, and the care was so much more, I'd say, I don't know, I mean, it was just frenetic because of the COVID, regulations that were going back. I was working in finance. With both of my children, they were both in daycare full time at like 10, 11 weeks because I had to get back to work. And, post COVID, I was traveling a lot more. I had been promoted, which was great. But that also meant like traveling meant even more help with childcare. And, it just got to a point where I can empathize with you both. I mean, it was really I not only had to secure daycare, there were 2 affordable options in our area that are reputable. He was on those wait lists for more than 2 years before, they finally called me and said, "Oh, we have a spot open up." I'm like, "He's got 6 more months before he starts pre-K. So thanks, but like, oh my God, that's crazy." And not only that, but I also needed, like, if I was traveling, we were trying to figure out like a part-time nanny situation. And because there were such a bottleneck in the daycare sector, not only that, nannies, like, I couldn't hire a part-time nanny that was like, seemed like she would be good. All the good ones were full-time or more. And that is like a salaried employee. I mean,
Yes.
that's serious dough. Um, and so I also felt that squeeze, like, okay, if we're gonna hire a nanny, like, that cost is so much higher, and I need to be making more to cover that. So that just expands, like, okay, not only do you have to contend with, the 9 to 5 aspect, but if you have a job that requires more than that, you really need to figure out, okay. And then that also gets into my older child, she was in school, so someone had to pick her up, and that so, like, it was really crushing you from so many different angles. Not only that, it was like, okay, there was COVID exposure, so a room would close, and,
Yeah.
that happened. I had to cancel a business trip because a room closed, and I was like, "Well, I don't have childcare, so I have to stay home." So yeah, like, you entered this when it was so much more problematic than it had been, back when I had my first in 2017. And even then, I mean, people then were talking about, like, the cost was still high even before all this. So, I appreciate you focusing on this, but we also talked a little bit about the earning aspect, right? Like, it's expensive, and there are women who leave the workforce because it just financially doesn't make sense to pay all that money into childcare if you're not making it. I have several friends who left the workforce altogether during COVID because it was too hard, and financially, they were like, "It just doesn't even make that much sense anyway." So, you have women leaving the workforce, and then, I've recently taken a little time off just because I wanted to spend time with my kids. And then you think, okay, well, then what does that do to my future earning potential? So you're either in or you're out of the labor market, right? There's really not much flexibility afforded women. And I think that plays a lot into how you guys talk about this policy issue. And I know, there have been a few Senate hearings recently where they did focus on the economic impact of women leaving the workforce because of childcare. So could you guys talk about that a little bit? Because I think that really, is another layer that isn't always spoken about as much as it should be.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I would say, when we're able to invest in childcare, we're investing in so much more. We're investing in the workforce, in women's development, in our children's future. And Mother Forward understands that the childcare crisis touches all of these aspects. And it's both an issue of supply and an issue of demand, where on the supply side, costs to provide childcare are skyrocketing. I know in New York specifically, no surprise here. We have a housing crisis. The typical cost of housing for a two-bedroom home right now is about 2,500, but the typical monthly cost of childcare for 2 children is more than that. So in New York alone, people are spending more on childcare than they are on housing. And meanwhile, childcare providers can barely afford to operate their businesses because the operating costs are so high. Licensure costs are so high and profit margins are so slim. So we are seeing more and more providers closing programs, closing rooms, and right now there aren't enough providers to meet the needs of families. So we're seeing those long waiting times of up to 2 years for childcare costs that a lot of families can't even afford. So it's an economic issue, especially for people who are impacted the most by lack of access to affordable care. And for the women, most often women of color who work low wage care jobs.
Yeah. And Christina, I'd love for you to chime in a little bit just on your own experience and just like finding affordable childcare or, friends of yours like doing that calculation. Like, okay, so much of my income is going to XYZ. Like, at what point does it make sense for one of the parents to just give up work and just stay home and take some time off?
Well, that's exactly what I think that's exactly what's ended up happening, right? Like, I can say for myself, I was working part-time, and taking care of my kids because it wasn't an option. I ended up moving to a different area, and there were wait lists, specifically for children younger than 2. It's so difficult. There are so many different regulations, and, it's harder, you have to do certain things to go from, like, a small childcare center to the large childcare center, so there's requirements that those centers have to meet. And so it's a combination of not just like, oh, well, there's wait lists and stuff, and there's a lot of kids being born or whatever, but there's issues that the childcare centers are dealing with as well. So like one woman in particular, I went to check out her small childcare center, daycare center, and she's like, yeah, I can't afford to do this because it would require me to go from like the small to the large is what I was chatting with her about. She's like, well, I'd have to hire somebody and then I have to pay that person. And then I'd have to make sure I met the X amount of, children, groups. So there's like the children under 2, and then there's the children older than 2. Right. And so there's just so many different dynamics. It's not as simple as, we just need more childcare workers. Well, first of all, do they get paid enough, right? But also, like, can they meet these requirements that are, that they have to meet for their licensures and stuff like that. But I have a lot of friends, yeah, the dad or the mom, depending on whoever's making them, higher wage, they end up quitting the job and they take care of their kids because especially after you go from like 1 to 2 to 3 or whatever, it's just a huge jump with regards to the cost. So, yeah, that's just what ends up happening. Someone ends up having to, quit their job, and then yeah, it ends up impacting their career. Typically, it's the women that end up, being impacted more. And I mean, that's just not. It's not economical. It's not beneficial for not just the family unit, but just the country as a whole. Right? We need more people to be working. So, it's frustrating, but right now I'm actually working 2 jobs. So I decided I had this moment where, I was praying about it because I didn't know what to do. I'm like, "Am I gonna quit my part-time job because I can't handle doing the part-time job and watching the kids, both of them, because there's too much, because my part-time job is really like a full-time job, and
Mhm.
then caring for the kids is a full-time job, so I'm like, "You know what?
Yeah.
I need to make more money." That was what I decided, and so now I work 2 jobs.
Mhm.
I work 2 jobs, and we have our kids enrolled in school. Both of them are in preschool now. They're old enough, but it's expensive. And so I had to make sure I found a good enough job making enough money and still keep my part-time job for us to be able to afford the childcare that we have.
I mean, it's maddening to watch, so many people go through this, because we've all been there, and it's ridiculous that like the cycle just continues. But I do want to say, I think one thing is that I really appreciate about Mother Forward is that you guys also talk about the providers and the teachers, because that's another thing that I think gets missed in the conversation. But I know I've overheard discussions of some of the teachers at my son's daycare, and it's really upsetting when you think about what they're making. Meanwhile, we're all busting our butts to pay for it. So it's just really disgusting that, I mean, these are the, aside from us, these are the most important people in our children's lives. I can say the care that my son receives at his daycare is absolutely stellar. And it's one of the daycares where I think we see the least amount of turnover among the teachers. There are people that have been there forever. I mean, I know they do their best, but it's still insane that we, along with public school teachers and teachers of all sorts, we don't really, compensate them the way they should be considering the vital role they play. So I just want to say I really appreciate that you guys bring the focus back to the workers as well, because that's incredibly important and they should be able to live off of, fair wages for the incredibly important work they're doing, not only for our families, but for the economy, right? Bringing it back to enabling parents to stay on the workforce and, be productive at their job, knowing their kids are well taken care of, while also, forming our future leaders of the world. So another thing that happened recently, which again I think is where Mother Forward is one of the most, effective groups I know of. There was a hearing at the Senate Finance Committee on this topic. I think a few weeks ago. I found out
Yeah.
about it because Mother Forward had posted it on their Instagram. I had no idea this hearing was taking place, but I tuned in. I was, first of all, really pleased to see that all four witnesses that were called forth as experts were women. Great. And also, it was a pretty productive discussion. I mean, these hearings for folks who watch them can usually be a lot of bloviating and grandstanding and really don't have a lot of substance to them. But I thought this was actually like a pretty good discussion at a time where we really don't see a lot of productive stuff happening on Capitol Hill. So, if you guys could talk a little bit about the hearing, were you happy with how it went? What was, I guess, the involvement of your organization and kind of what comes next?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, Mother Fork was not part of that hearing, just to clarify,
Mhm.
but we did, like most things happening in Washington, as my lamp just falls off my desk, we had our eyes really close on this hearing, and it was an interesting one because the Senate Committee on Finance, obviously talks about all of the economic impacts on, um, all of these different things that they're discussing, and this hearing in particular, they started off talking about proposals for vouchers and programs that have been underfunded and how to boost wages for childcare workers, focusing on the affordability and where to get the funds. But they also talked a lot about the availability of childcare. So far in our conversation, we've talked a lot about daycare and preschool, but there is childcare beyond that. There's aftercare for older children who are in school. If we're in August, there's summer camps. There's so many different spaces that the care economy touches. And I really like that this hearing really discussed about this as a holistic issue.
Mhm.
Um, the way Mother Ford was involved was after the hearing, there is an open period where people can submit their statements. And we put together a toolkit to allow parents to draft their own experiences and put those experiences on the record by submitting them to the Senate Finance Committee. So now everybody who has submitted a letter has that on record, and over 50 people submitted statements, ensuring that moms are heard, and also ensuring that childcare is fully funded in the 2025 budget, which is somehow already coming up. So, over the next couple of months, we do want to continue to submit statements as more hearings come up. But we also want to make sure that childcare becomes an issue for voters and for candidates.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, this week, the Senate did vote down the expansion of the child care tax credit. So we are seeing there are a lot of conversations happening right now around the care economy, around affordable childcare, around access to childcare. And our main priority right now is to keep that conversation going and to keep mothers and people who are adjacent to motherhood excited and driven to really put the pressure on politicians and make sure that this becomes and continues to be a priority.
Uh, Great. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the bill that failed this week. That was just horrible to see.
Hard.
Because I mean, first of all, let's make sure everyone knows that that bill, um, the child care tax credit is going to expire in 2025 if the Senate cannot pass something. The bill passed the House, let's see, it was 357 to 70. I mean, that is a big
Massive.
bipartisan, um, you know, passage in a time when it doesn't seem like they can get anything done. So they got that done, and then it needed 60 votes in the Senate. It failed, 48 in favor, 44 opposed. So boo, to the
Boo.
Senate.
Yes.
Boo, boo, boo. And I'm gonna be following you ladies, because I know you're already thinking about what's next and you're gonna keep on that. But for anyone listening, I mean, the child care tax credit benefits all of us.
All of
But
us.
most importantly, there's like what 16 million low income children that would benefit from that bill, and it wouldn't be as great as I think the COVID bill, right? The benefits wouldn't be as great. That bill, I think, cut child poverty in half, something
I
like
did.
that. I
Yeah.
mean, so the fact that like we can't do that is ridiculous, and I love that you guys are really pushing on that and keeping it at the forefront. And everyone, look at how your representatives voted. I know my congressman and my senators voted in favor, but you all need to be looking at how yours voted on this bill and hold them accountable in November.
That's right.
Um, Now, from that, I want to go to, the fact that this, like, we're filming this on a Saturday afternoon. It is tough to find the time if you're a working parent. And Christina, you probably know this more than any of us, working two jobs and having two little kids. But one of the things that's great about your organization is you focus on ways to like find people where they are, find parents, find moms where they are. And I think that's what like this podcast is about you don't need to quit your job to become a full-time activist. You don't need to quit your job to run for office to make a difference. You can, like you can find the time, you can find ways. Here's a couple things you can do. So, could you each talk a little bit about some of the events that your local chapters are having that may be at like a park or incorporating kids, or ways you're finding the time to get involved, and you're seeing others make the time to do this despite their busy schedules? Maybe
Uh,
Christina, if you want to start, and then Sarah. I know you've
sure,
done some stuff too.
sure. Yeah, so, you really have to be strategic in general, right? When you're a mom and working, whether you're married or not, right? Like everybody's got to be strategic with their time, but it's definitely doable, and everyone's very flexible. Our meetings are typically in the evening time after work hours, and so that makes it possible for me to join. My kids are like all of us, all of our kids are typically around and hanging out, and it's not a stuffy experience, right? It's like a very like kind of like a just like a family almost,
Yeah.
we're just a big family with our kids taking baths or whatever it is that we're doing when we're doing our meetings. And or yeah, we have had different involvements that have taken place at the park, right? Our most recent, I think, town hall was at Parks,
Yeah.
and that's where we met. So getting involved in different types of you know important activities with regards to meeting, whether it's our own, virtual meetings that we're doing, conference calls, or yeah, we take our kids with us, right? On Capitol Hill, brought our kids with us to Capitol Hill, right? And interacted with the government officials, and you just kept it real. Like I think that's what's great about Mother Forward, is that we're not pretending to be something that we're not. Like we keep it 100% the whole time. This is what we have going on, and everyone's super flexible, and that's the only way it really works.
Yeah. And I think that visibility of, having your kids with you is really helpful for folks who are kind of outside of that parenthood sphere too, bringing the kids to Capitol Hill. That was an initiative I was part of, but being able to show our representatives, this is my family and this is who is impacted by these laws, like that is a tangible way to really showcase the impact there. And that's why the playground town halls were so effective too. Not only did we have that visibility, but we didn't have to worry about providing daycare, about finding a sitter so that we could go to this town hall. It was a family initiative. Let's bring our whole family to the park and talk to our representatives about how we're being impacted by childcare access and affordability.
And that's something, it's funny you mentioned the playground town halls because that's something I've suggested a few times to some of
Mhm.
the, candidates that I've come to know, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's a great idea," but then it never happens. So I really think that, that's worth pushing for, like, pushing elected officials to have and candidates to have playground town halls. You go and show up at the state fair and you show up here and there, wherever, but, like, stop having all your rallies at, like, a VFW in the middle of the day. Just,
Yes.
like, do something where it's open to children and it's open to parents bringing their children, and it's, like, very, very acceptable, normal. It's comfortable for the kids. I've brought my daughter to campaign rallies, and I had someone shush her once, and I was like, "Don't you dare. Don't you
No.
dare." So, I love that. So I certainly hope to see that become more of a normal practice of every campaign. Um, and I wanna talk quickly about the membership pledge that you guys take because I think that's also a really cool aspect of the organization. It's kinda sets the table, like, this is what you're all focused on. You don't have to agree on everything, but when you're in this space, like, this is what you're all advocating for, and it kinda keeps everyone kind of on the same page. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the pledge was definitely a labor of love. And I joined before the pledge actually existed, and before we even settled on a name of Mother Forward.
Mm.
So there were a lot of early discussions about what the pledge meant, how it could be framed and worded, and also, what mothering means. When we think about Mother Forward, it's not just noun mother forward, it's also verb mother forward. So we of course are moms first, but we have plenty of people in the group who are mother adjacent, people who aren't yet parents, people who would one day like to be parents or just kind of take a parenthood role. So we did want to make sure that we were inclusive in both the noun and the verb aspect, and also talk a lot about how we are mothering the economy, we're mothering each other. We are bringing mothers forward into the spotlight and making sure that they are taken care of within this care economy. So that was a big part about the pledge, which we talked a lot about on our monthly calls. There were a lot of one-off calls between members, to really nail down what that pledge meant. And ultimately, what it comes down to is having a million moms or mother adjacent folks come forward and say, this is critical to the way that our economy works, the way our country works, and the way that we, as working parents and working individuals, continue to succeed.
Great. Christina, do you have anything to add to that or on the pledge or kind of what it means to you?
Yeah, like Sarah, I joined before there was a name, before there was a pledge. And I think that, it just kind of helps to solidify
Yeah.
who's involved, what is our group consisting of? Who are these individuals that are part of our grassroots group, and efforts towards making lasting change. And what I think is cool is it's not just moms, it's grandmothers, it's aunts, it's dads, it's everyone, right? Like Sarah explained it very well. So I think that we need something like that to help people, I think, just remember what it is that we're fighting for. And it's not just, myself, but it's our group and it's the bigger picture of, our country. And I think that that pledge it helps to solidify that idea and what it is that we're doing together.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just leave it to moms and women to come up with something like and put so much thought into it. And I feel like with so many projects I work on, there are people, I think a lot of times they're kind of men who tend to rush into things, right? And especially, Christina, you have a research background. Like when you're setting up a research project, it's really important to get the framework right at the front end, right? Like you put in the work at the front end because then everything else becomes so much easier. So if your mission is clearly stated and if you are all aligned and you set the table, like this is why we're here, what we're about, going forward, like you are focused. And I think that's why you guys have been able to be so effective. I mean, it's so clear to me that you're you're driven and you're focused and you're really making things happen. And I think, having the pledge and putting that thought in at the front end really, set the organization off on such a great foot. So kudos to you all for having that vision and committing to it in that way. Um, and I'd love to talk about some of the events coming up, how people can get involved if they're interested and if they're in your areas or other chapters. What are some of the ways people can kind of start to dive in if they like what they're hearing?
Event-wise, as we're
Mm,
heading back to school and heading toward election season, we talked about the playground town halls. We're starting to have some discussions on how we can begin to host those again
mm,
ahead of the election season. So, I mean, definitely stay in touch with us on social media. You can find us, I think, anywhere at this point. We also have a group Discord where we're having a lot of regular conversations, sharing research, planning meetings, taking actions. It
mm.
really is a community of moms and people who care about working parenthood and about childcare. And that's where the action really happens. So I definitely encourage folks to join our Discord to be part of that conversation and help us plan those events.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think your Instagram, what's the Instagram is at mothering.forward or what's
It
the
is, yeah, and you can find all of our social media as well, with our membership pledge,
okay.
which I think that's probably easier to find. That's at bit.ly/momspledge.
Okay, great. Because I think your social media is really full of helpful information, and it's also, like, very, digestible. You guys do a really good job of putting things out there pretty clearly, and succinctly, and it's really easy to follow, and I always kind of, like, come away with, "Okay, well, here's one thing I can do right now." So, I definitely encourage people to follow you guys on social media. Also, continue to look at, what the Senate is doing with regards to that hearing.
For
I don't
sure.
know what the next steps are, but clearly you helped 50 people submit statements, so that's substantive, as well as, people should really look at how their reps voted on the recent, let's see, the legislation was the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act of 2024. Again, you guys have posted about that on social media. I'm sure you'll probably continue to follow it. I don't know what the next step is now that it's failed in the Senate. I don't know if they can bring it to a vote again or what have you, but I would encourage people to look at how their reps in the House as well as the Senate, how they
Yes.
voted and call their offices. I know, um, mine all voted in favor, but if they had not, and I did go through a time where I had a congressman who never voted the way I wanted, and I called his office all the time. His number is in my phone. So
Yes.
at the very least, it doesn't take much time to send an email, make a phone call, and talk to your friends in your district too, right? Like this is how democracy works. If you're not happy with the way things are going, you don't feel like you're being represented, get your friends together, join a group like Mother Forward, tell your friends to call your reps and make sure that you are holding them accountable. Christina, do you have any other things that you think you're watching or other tips? I like to make sure that folks who listen to this, they don't just end it and say, "Oh, that was interesting," and go about their day, but they like do something, take a step to get active. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think that, it's really easy to notate for our own lives. Like these are the things that are going on in my life, and I don't like what's going on. I'm not happy with it, right? But we just continue on, right? And just do the same old thing. It's very easy to get in a habit or whatever. But I think that if we want something to improve, we want anything to change, if we don't get involved, then we really are just contributing to that same cycle. So I just hope that we, both of us, and all of us here, with this discussion inspires people to get involved, whether it's joining, starting small. Join the Facebook, join the Instagram groups, just see what's going on, right? Have conversations with your neighbors. Like I think about 6 neighbors that moved in around the same time as me, and they all have kids around my age. And so, do something with them, like people that are in your community. I'm trying to get them involved, right? And we're just starting with like a group of just the moms,
Mm.
right, on our street, and doing something together, with our kids, going to the park, whatever, right? Like whatever it is that we can do, going on walks. It's as simple as a walk. Like I just went with my neighbor yesterday with her 2 kiddos around the same age as mine, and we just go on a walk and we talk, and you know, that can lead to something more, right? And then I've told her about Mother Forward as well. So, I think what we're doing is like just one small step, but it can be huge in the big grand scheme of things. Um, have those conversations, I
Yeah.
think.
I think, you know what, that's so true. It's about getting, like, off your computer, off your screens, in real life, talking to people. Those of us in the organizing world, talk about relational organizing, but it works. It matters to have those discussions. Um, and that's what democracy is. John Stewart had a great quote recently where he was just talking about, like, democracy is a lunch pail job. It's not like just showing up and voting on election day and forgetting about it. It's day in, day out, doing the work, talking to people, hashing things out, and then showing up and voting, your values. So, thank you, both of you, for spending time
Yeah,
with me
thank you.
today. You're so busy and you're doing such awesome work. So I can only hope that, this podcast will help bring some more eyes and some more voices to your cause. And yeah, I just applaud everything. I think you guys are just doing such great work at such a critical time. And I really think you're making things happen. And I think this is going to be so beneficial to not only, the folks that follow behind us in a few years, but our daughters, right? Like, I don't want my daughter to face the same bullshit choices that I had to. Like,
Amen.
so
Amen.
pardon the profanity, but I'm from Jersey. So that's just how we do it here. Anyway, thank you so much. So, the Substack Politics for Parents, will have some links to Mother Forward, any key legislation. If you want help finding your reps and their voting records, we will provide show notes with all of that. So, you know, um, everything you need, follow Mother Forward on Instagram, on their social channels, anywhere you can find them. Continue to stay on our Substack at Politics for Parents, and I'll make sure, any key moves you guys, post about, I will be sharing with our audience as well. So folks have no
Thank you.
excuse but to get a little bit more involved. So thank you again. You guys have a great day. It's been a great discussion.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
You
much.
both
You
too.
take
Take
care.
care.